Should you be able to see who is in a survive with friends in the endgame screen? I recently did a poll on this, and out of nearly 10,000 voters, 80% of you said yes. Now, just to be clear, the way this would work is that both the killer and survivors would be able to see exactly who was grouped up after a match was over only. Using a color-coded icon, you could see if you played with a 4-man survive with friends, a 3-man survive with friends, 2 duo survive with friends, a 2-man and 2 solos, or a total solo team. So I went through the comments that you guys left on the poll, and I wanted to address some of the most common complaints about this idea. The first of which is actually that you should be able to see who a survive with friends is in the pre-game lobby as killer too, which I understand the sentiment, and maybe if there was ever a ranked to unranked mode that would work, but in the game as it is now, I believe it would be a disaster to do this. Killers would dodge lobbies with SWFs in them. Killers who didn't dodge those lobbies would put on absolutely disgusting add-ons and would most likely be playing as an S tier killer. Queue times for survive with friends would skyrocket. Ultimately, people who played in SWFs will just have an awful experience. And I know you might be thinking, well, they make the experience terrible for the killer, so isn't it only fair that the killer makes the experience equally terrible for them as well? And I don't believe so, because the vast majority of survive with friends are not the sweaty toxic elder gods that you do occasionally run into. And making people have a consistently awful experience while playing with their friends will just make them quit playing DBD. So I don't see it as necessary, especially considering that up until we can actually see who is playing in a SWF in the endgame screen, we don't actually know how often SWF is the reason we're losing games. We need that information first before we can really discuss this pre-game lobby idea any further. Someone with 8,000 hours can probably tell who is in a survive with friends together, but there are a lot of newer killers who believe they're playing against a 4-man survive with friends every single match they lose, when in reality they're probably not just playing very well and are hindering their own ability to get better by clinging to this excuse. This entire idea of seeing who was grouped up together in the endgame screen is about making the game more healthy. Being able to see who was in a survive with friends together after the match adds more positive elements to DBD than it does negative elements. Whereas of right now, being able to see who was in a SWF in the pre-game lobby would probably add way more negative elements to the game than it would positive ones, in my opinion. The most important aspect of getting this post-match information would be the feedback. Knowing as a killer that you got destroyed by a complete solo team would make you have to self-evaluate. Did I use a bad build? Was my strategy flawed? Did I get a terrible map for the killer that I was playing? Or even just bad tile RNG. Likewise, if you got destroyed by a 4-man survive with friends, they would no longer be able to pretend that they were all solos to try and further shame you after the game was over. I think it's obvious at this point that a sizable portion of the DBD community on both sides, killer and survivor, have a very undeserved ego, and this would help keep that in check. Stacking literally every advantage you possibly can before a match starts and then acting toxic about it is super cringe and desperately needs to be tempered in any way possible. So I want to address another fair counter-argument that I saw in the comments, which is that killers will be much more toxic in the endgame chat if they see everyone was in a survive with friends, whether they won the match or lost it. If they lose, it'll be, oh look, pussy 4-man can't win without blah blah blah. And if they win, it'll be, oh my god, imagine getting stomped that hard while playing in a 4-man survive with friends. And I do think this is a somewhat valid criticism of the idea. It will definitely influence toxic interactions in the endgame chat. However, I think those endgame chats were most likely going to be toxic anyway, so I don't believe that it will cause a noticeable increase in toxicity. Just an alternative dialogue. Ideally, getting the post-match information would lead to overall less toxicity in the long run. Also, let's be honest, 4-man bully squads do not want this feature to exist. The anonymity increases their power to make a killer feel bad about an awful match. That will be taken away, which will be extra handy for 4-man squads who stream snipe, and also people that survive with friends with cheaters will now be accountable to some degree as well. Plus, being able to see who is in a SWF post-game is good for both sides. For instance, if you beat a killer with a complete solo squad, the killer can no longer accuse you of being in a SWF. They have to own the loss and self-evaluate. ideally, which is something that is in very short supply when it comes to the way DBD players think about their own matches and gameplay. Another critique of the idea was that it would be a violation of player privacy, sort of, it's none of your business who I'm playing with type of thing, and I get that to some extent. But if privacy is so important to you, there's a lot of options open to you. For PC players, there's a new stream sniper protection setting that will hide your identity. Then there's outside settings like making your profile private and things like that, so basically you can still keep your privacy with a small amount of effort. Any further complaints are most likely toxic players wanting to hide the fact that they are in a SWF. A somewhat justified but conspiratorial comment was that behavior is afraid to show the truth of how severely Survive with Friends affects the outcome of matches, basically implying that 3-man or 4-man Survive with Friends are responsible for such a large amount of the total escapes in DBD that the information needs to be hidden or else chaos will erupt. Conspiracy or not, it's definitely a possibility. Sweaty Survive with Friends do have a nearly guaranteed victory against any killer who came into a match unprepared, whether because they used a low tier killer, bad perks, or just didn't bring a sacrificial ward, etc. But even if that's the case, I still prefer to have the truth, maybe even more so. If SWF is that powerful, my guess is that until behavior implements solo queue buffs, the post-match info about who was in a SWF will stay concealed. I also saw a comment that made a really good point, which is that with consistent feedback on who is in a Survive with Friends and who isn't, killers will learn what strategies and perks actually work best against the best players, SWF or solo. For example, I can go on to Dead by Daylight right now and hard tunnel 10 matches in a row and surely win 9 out of 10 of them. But if my one loss was against the only 4-man Survive with Friends I played against, then I know I need to change my gameplay if I want to win against better teams. In my opinion, there's no point in developing a strategy that only allows you to beat solo queue players and average SWFs. So that's the most valid reason we need this information. It's absolutely essential and benefits basically everyone except toxic a-holes. So that's my argument. I really do think that a lot of killer mains, even myself, would probably be surprised by how many solo teams wrecked us and 4-man Survive with Friends that we completely destroyed, who we thought were solo queue players. The amount of complaints I hear on a daily basis about Survive with Friends is mind-numbing at this point, and just finally having the truth available would be awesome for the overwhelming majority of the DBD community, and especially for content creators. Let me know what you all think though. I know about 80% of you agree anyway, but it's completely possible I overlooked something super important. And as always, thank you so much for watching and have a good one.